We'll get cracking.
Yeah, mate.
Guys, okay, welcome. Thanks, Dave, for that. Just before we get started, thanks to those that have logged in this evening. We will record it, so I know a lot of people will catch them on the recording as well. Appreciate it's probably one of the hottest days of the year. So I knew we probably wouldn't get as many as what we have been, but nonetheless, we've got two excellent guests on with us this evening. So I'll just share with you guys, more for Dave. I think Dave's probably the only one that hasn't got 20. This must be the easiest quiz, by the way. Yes, Dave, number 14, copied off Anil in the chat function, no doubt, with Oldham. So, yeah, welcome back. I know it's been 2 weeks now, so when we started talking a couple of weeks ago, we've done a little bit of consultation and decided that actually probably weekly, it was right to move it to bi-weekly, which is what we've done now. So these are going to run every 2 weeks, certainly for the next month or two, and may then change again depending on how people are, where people are within the plan to play strategy. We might actually get out and get playing at some point as well, in which case we might need to adapt again. So I think most of the guys that have been on, or certainly the group that are on at the minute, you've all been on. You've all been on before, so just laptop or tablet definitely preferred to a mobile phone, but you can use the smartphone. Just toggle between if you are on a smartphone. If you're fortunate enough to be sat in your garden next to the barbecue or outside on the Isle of Man, then you will no doubt be on a tablet of some description possibly. Mute yourself if you can, and then just unmute yourself. I think because we've not got as many on tonight, pretty much we'll try and make it as interactive as we can. I know that the two lads will definitely be keen on that and getting people's thoughts. So I would urge, it'll be a plea now, if you could contribute throughout, that would be much appreciated. It certainly helps the guys presenting with the content as well, and it kind of brings it to life and makes it a little bit more real. So feel free to. Our gaffer, I'm calling him gaffer tonight because I can't deal with three Bens in the same call. So Ben Snowden, my gaffer, is on WhatsApp call. Give him a call if you need to. He's officially tech support tonight. So again, and Ben will help out where he can as well, and he'll drop things in chat function for people, links if things are mentioned as we go. Just before, who won the quiz? Not you, Dave. So just before we get started, it was just an opportunity to try and get people's thoughts really on where they were. So before the lads go on to the content, which is going to look a little bit around differentiation, I just wanted to pick people's brains. So in the chat function, if you could, it's just there's sort of 6 questions there. It kind of, well, it'll act as twofold really. One, it'll help this evening because I know some of the things that might be spoken about might be around planning to play and what's people's thoughts around what they're doing. How are people looking to plan? Where are they at on that journey? Some people might be saying, no, we're not at all. Some people might be close to playing or back playing as in its broader sense. So if you could just help us out, and this is probably from a county, a bit of a selfish perspective as well from a county. We're just after a rough idea from coaches as to where you're currently at, where your thoughts are. There's no pressure, by the way. It's not going to be held on to anybody. We're just interested to know what people have started to think about. That might help us inform what we do. So if it's, as an example, if everybody's starting to think about training and going back, then is there something that as a county we need to do? So do we need to start producing some guides, some training session planners, which I know sort of myself and Dave have been talking about? Is it supplying some sessions, some ideal things that people could be looking to do, given the current guidelines? I will stress the current. They'll probably change in the next few days or next week or so. So yeah, if you could, that would be a big help. Thanks, Jackie, for feeding that in. And by the way, if people want to jump off mute, by the way, and just shout up, that might be a quicker way as well. So feel free to, if there's anything at all that the thoughts. I don't want to hijack it with the COVID-19 because we've sworn not to talk about COVID on this coffee club. but it's kind of relevant at this moment in time. So if anyone wants to jump off and chat through, so Sempe is reviewing from 1st of July. Consult with parents and players. This has spoken to secretary and club committee. Go on, Craig. Do you want to jump off and share with folk what you're looking at doing?
Yeah, no problem, pal. We've had down at the club, we've had a sort of COVID-19 group that's been put together. They've been working on risk assessment and things like that for the past sort of 3 to 5 weeks. I think there's been a lot of work on Italy. This week we've been sort of briefing. We had that briefed out to coaches on Tuesday night, and we're starting to drip feed that out to parents now. How we're going to manage it, get the kids back down and everything. I mean, we're quite lucky with the size of our facility. We can manage it quite safely and quite easily with the plan they've come up with. So in that sense, we are lucky. The majority of parents we've briefed it to are all happy and confident to bring their kids back. So at the minute, it's looking good. I think the one thing I would say is that a lot of coaches did mention on the Zoom call we had was around planning sessions and stuff like that. So from what you're saying from your sort of perspective, I think that might be a big help leading towards other clubs getting back as well.
Yeah. When you say planning sessions, Craig, do you mean like actual activities or practices that you can potentially do that fit the current guidelines?
Yeah, I think so, mate. I mean, there is a lot out there on social media and stuff you can find, but certainly that was the theme around our group call as coaches. There was 1 or 2 wanting sessions and things like that. So I think something like that would be a big help. Yeah.
I know because Ben and Ben Qualtrough on the Isle of Man, I know Ben will chat about this evening because I know they've done an awful lot of work around planning, around sessions that will get kids playing, but obviously fitting the current guidelines. So it'll probably help out this evening as well. But yeah, no, I appreciate that, Craig. Jackie, just do us a favour, will you just share with people what you mean by the socialising sessions?
We're not actually wanting to do kind of like football as it is. We want the kids to come down, just kind of get used to the different environment, and kind of like look at the protocols that they have to do, like sanitising, kind of give them a bit more of a relaxed atmosphere. And we're actually looking at doing like a foot golf thing, but it won't be foot golf, but it's more just to kind of get the little teams together. We've got a few that have got anxiety issues, so we need to make sure that they're sorted.
Yeah, no, good stuff. So the foot golf, have you got like a timeline as to how long you're going to do that type of thing for, Jackie, or is it just till guidance changes, or
guidance change? Guidance change. I've got my 2 metre stick ready to cut down to a 1 metre stick.
Thanks, Boris. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've got that kind of ready so I can shorten as well for the managers and stuff. We've done like a bit of a special handbook as well, so that they know exactly what to expect and this, that, and the other. And the foot golf, because we're at a school ground area, we're going to do it more master ball skills instead of like popping it into a hole and stuff like that. So we're utilising the area.
Good stuff. Yeah, and at least now you'll have 2 1 metre sticks there rather than just the 1 2 metre sticks. So you can thank Boris for that one. No, good stuff. Anil, thanks for that. Already created more than 80 sessions for the season. Decent. Feel free to share, mate, if you do want to. Spoken to the venue, yeah. So there's some decent stuff in. I know we've done some stuff for our county with the club secretaries as well, just to give people a heads up as to what the types of things they should be doing. So if there's any coaches on here from our certainly our county in particular, I know there's a couple from outside. So and you haven't spoke with your club secretary or committee yet, make sure that you do, because they'll be able to share some stuff that Ben, I call him my Ben, Gaffer on the call tonight, that Ben shared directly with club secretaries, which was a decent, an awful lot of information really, but really detailed session. So please make sure you do before that. Yeah, it can. And Craig, thanks for that, because it kind of gives me a heads up as to what we think doing. I've got, like you said, there's loads of stuff out there on social media to pick up, and I'm sure this evening, by the way, you're going to pick up some more stuff from these 2 guys, or now 1 guy. Don't know if Has Ben Hardaker left us? Oh no, he's still there. Right, so thanks for that. I'm not going to introduce you because you've got a slide yourselves where you're going to introduce. So, Ben, do you want to take control? Hang on a second. Yeah. Ben Qualtrough, I think I've just gave control to yourself and not Ben Hardaker. So
I've just checked.
Yeah, you're there. Yeah, spot on, mate. You're in.
Does that come through yet?
Yeah, it has. Yeah.
Brilliant. All right, where's Ben? There he is. Brilliant. Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the coffee club this evening. Hopefully, like Reedy says, we're gonna look at how we can make it as interactive as possible with so few on the call. But that's fine. I can't blame everyone for sitting out in the garden with the beautiful weather that we're having. And I think Ben's rubbing it in a little bit, just showing us that sunshine in the background there. Okay, but managing difference, hot topic in football at any level of grassroots, but also even within the academy settings as well. So it goes all the way through this. The picture you can see on your screen now is apparently Romelu Lukaku at 13 years old. So if you look at the difference there between him and his opposite number, we can see that the differences do present themselves whatever level anyone is playing at. So just a quick one before we start, and I'm gonna let Ben introduce himself first. If that's okay. Click on. Some flattering pictures there. Ben, do you want to?
Yeah, thank you for sharing a picture of me from 10 years ago, Ben. That's certainly done me a favour. There's far fewer greys in that one. Welcome everyone. It's great to be a part of this evening. I've been fortunate enough to sit in and participate myself a number of times. So I was delighted when James asked me to come and jump in and share some thoughts and experiences with you all. Very briefly, a little background. I live over on the Isle of Man, so we are very, very fortunate. We were able to lock our borders and keep all those dirty germs out, and we managed to keep the I'm not allowed to use the words, am I? We managed to keep the risk to a minimum, so we've done very well. We're slightly ahead of you now, so we're back to full contact football, but we restarted with the same situation you guys are in now. We restarted 4 weeks ago, so I've gone through exactly the experiences that you're preparing to, so hopefully I can give you a few thoughts and ideas on that, and also obviously having been coaching and working for the FA for a number of years now, share with you some ideas around differentiation as we go along.
Yeah, Brill, thanks. I'm the other Ben, the second Ben in the conversation. Again, from out of the county, from West Yorkshire. My background is I've previously worked for the Football Association in full-time capacity, same as Ben, within the skills programme. I'm currently involved with an academy within West Yorkshire at Leeds United. I work in the foundation phase there, and I also tutor for the FA on level 1, level 2 in the UEFA B licence. The day job, if I've got time for a day job with all that going on, is I'm a college lecturer at a local FE college. So looking at it from an education point of view, hopefully I'm going to try and steer some of the differentiation approaches that we might look at in an education type setting towards what it looks like at football and how we can support that learning process. So as James said at the start, if you've got any questions, I'm happy to just ping yourself off mute, ask away. Me and Ben want this to be as organic as possible. So it really is literally a conversation. We've got a few slides, but it's not going to be, here's a lot of content, we're going to talk at you. It's going to be, let's put some content up or some pictures, let's have a discussion around it. So, okay, Ben, are you taking away the first one?
Sounds that way.
Well, I just thought I'd volunteer you.
Right, so I know Ben's put some questions out and James has sent them on to you. So kick us off. How do you currently differentiate within your coaching sessions? So as Ben said, we do want this to be as interactive and as personal for you as it can be. So if you're willing to, would you just mind sharing on the text box any suggestions for how you currently differentiate? From a personal perspective, as you're thinking about putting some stuff in there, I think before we're able to even consider differentiating, we need to know the individuals and the people that we've got within the session. So who are we actually dealing with? Do we just assume that we've got a group of 10, 12-year-olds that we're going to be working with across a 12-month period? Or do we treat them as 12 individuals with their own wants and needs and experiences? does every 12-year-old come to your session from the same place, the same amount of experience, the same family background, the same motivations and reasons for being there? So before we can even consider how we're going to differentiate, we probably need to know a little bit of information around the actual people that we've got in front of us. So any thoughts that you've got around how you do it, just pop them in there as we're talking. And for me, the most important single question that I would always ask when I first meet a group of kids or within our groups here on the Isle of Man would be, why are the kids actually there? So those 10, 12-year-olds that you've got, that group of men that you've got that you're coaching in a senior team, the 5 or 6, 7-year-old girls that you've got within your club that you're just starting up, what is their actual motivation? Why is it that they're there in the first place? Because that's probably going to lend itself to deciding what you're going to do and how you're going to structure things. Likewise, I know Jackie has mentioned earlier on in the text box there and on her conversation around, she's got a number of kids with anxiety. So is that going to drive how you differentiate, when you differentiate, and why you differentiate? And they're obviously planning on making sure that when the kids arrive at their first session, they make things really personal. I'm just going to share a link, not to watch now, but this is something that we shared for our children here before they came back to their first session. We appreciated that we had some kids who were super confident that we'd worked with for a number of years. So we used them in our very first session. We got some little clips of them, and we shared that as a video for the parents to share with their children around what it was going to look like when you came to a session. So those kids who've got anxiety problems, at this time, it's obviously going to be very difficult for them. We want to make sure that when they arrive, they feel safe and they feel comfortable immediately. So we've treated 2 groups of children very differently. One group we've got straight in 9 o'clock first morning back. The groups where we know we've got children who are going to struggle a little bit, we've held them later on in the week. We've shared some video with them. We've gave them a little bit of a comfort blanket of seeing other kids playing and what it's going to look like, just to reassure them. So before we even start the session, we've already begun differentiating how we're going to treat those children. And as I say, that links quite closely to their motivation for why they play. So has anyone got any, if you do have any thoughts, please do pop them in with around how you currently differentiate. Ben, yourself, what would you say are some of your key strategies for how you differentiate in the moment?
I think you've picked up on some really good points there, Ben, and I think the biggest one for me is understanding them as individuals. So how much do we understand about the players? And it's something we're going to go into in a little bit more detail as we hopefully progress through. And I'm hoping that the ladies and gents who are on tonight can give us some real examples of how they've tried it. But I think that understanding the individual, understanding what they want, what they need, is fundamental within this process, and it's part of the coaching process. So I'm really interested to kind of hear the thoughts and opinions of people on the call. How do you challenge is my biggest question. How do you challenge all these different abilities, these different people with different personalities that come to your sessions? How do you make it so it doesn't become a one-size-fits-all approach and we're trying to develop them all in the same way at the same time? So if anyone has got anything, please drop it in the chat box or just jump in. Like I said, feel free to take yourself off mute.
Ben, just obviously the two Bens then. So on that, you're talking about both sort of hitting on the how we get to know the why behind the player. So why are they attending? Have you got any examples of what you've done sort of practically that you'd be able to share that might allow you to get to know the players on a better level? So as an example, previously in some of the work that I was involved in, we used to do sort of questionnaires with the players, but I'm talking a number of years ago now, and I'm guessing times move on and technology moves on. Is there anything that you've done more recently that's really helped you get to know that player a little bit more?
Yeah, do you want me to jump in, Ben?
Go for it, Paul.
Yeah, I think understanding their motivations is key. So I still think the questionnaires are pertinent, James, if I'm being honest, and I've seen them used to good effect. Just to understand more about the people you've got in front of you, so then you can tailor your delivery. So using questionnaires, I know Ben might touch on this, but using things that, especially if you're working with a young group of people, that they relate to. So your match attacks ideas, you can get to know more about them about what they think about their own capabilities and where they're at currently. Your FIFA Ultimate Team type stuff. But even just conversing with them on a personal level, and I think Jackie's raised a great point in the chat before we started around that socialisation aspect of it, and I think that is going to be key for the resumption of grassroots football. You've got a hell of a lot of young people, whether they're in foundation phase or youth development phase, who've been away from that kind of environment for a long period of time now. So how are you going to integrate them back into that environment? How are you going to make it a safe environment? Because it might be them coming into it that there is a little bit of work to do in the psychological and social corners. And I think that's key, and it's going to come up shortly on the slide around that four-corner approach. Do we just assume differentiation in football is specifically within the physical and the technical and tactical areas, and we have to adapt our sessions for those needs? Or do we start looking towards the softer skills? So if I'm going to throw it up now, actually. If I look at the four-corner model, the left-hand side of the model, the technical, tactical, the physical is your hardware. That's how I look at it. The psychological, social, the right-hand side is the software. And how do we get both collaborating and working together? Well, differentiation might be a key part of that. So you might have someone who technically, tactically is the top of your group, for example, but psychologically needs a lot of support. So how are you going to differentiate the task, the practice, the session, to support them within that area, so that all the bits of the jigsaw here are working together, so to speak? Ben, anything you want to throw in?
Yeah, you've mentioned there about conversing, and I think that is, for me, that would be the single most important tool you've got in your armoury, whatever level you're working at, whoever you're working with. We talk on FA courses about using arrival activities. How many of those arrival activities are we using to really connect with the children or the people that we're coaching? Because that's what they are, the people. So are we showing a genuine interest in their lives? Are we asking them questions that we can maybe use to our advantage as we understand a little bit more about them? So it's one thing to say, have you had a good day? It's another thing to say, what great thing have you done today? Because when you ask them what great thing they've done today, whatever they tell you, whatever that answer is, that's your little gold nugget. Then that's your little way in. If it's something to do with home life, right? I know a little bit about your home life now. Let's dig into that a little bit. If it was a game they played at lunchtime with the best mate, who's the best mate? Is the best mate in this session? Right, that might help me with something. If it's talking about before they came to the session, they sat at home with mum and they watched something on TV and that was just like magic, then that's all those little bits of information. They're what help you understand that person. The key is to actually ask the question and then listen to what they say as an answer. I know Sally was on a number of weeks ago now, and she was talking about connecting with them away from the session. So we've got things like quizzes we can do at the minute. We can do different activities with them. Massively, massively beneficial to us at the moment with not being able to see the kids as much as maybe we'd like to. We can use that to really understand a bit more about them. If you've got one example we've done, actually, we did a quiz within our club. We got the kids to give us themes that they wanted us to write the questions on. So now we're learning a little bit about their general life. So whether it was a specific taste in music, whether it was films they like, whether it was cartoons they watch, whether it was like, there was all kinds of crazy stuff. I'm not going to go into it all, but I think that sort of information where they're telling you their interests away from football, that's a real way in. I'm definitely guilty of it myself. We see a kid turn up with a full kit on, we immediately think that's a footballer. Actually, it's a hand-me-down from their older sister, or dad's a massive Tottenham fan, so they've all got Tottenham kits regardless of whether they like Tottenham or not. So it's making sure that we don't get blinkered by that and we actually learn about that individual person. So just conversation, definitely just conversation is your key starting point. But again, as you said, James, questionnaires are great, match attacks are great. So little things that you can get the kids to do away from your sessions and share some feedback and thoughts and ideas around their general life. It's all going to be beneficial to getting to know them, and that then obviously leads into using it effectively within your session.
And Ben, just on that, so you talked about, you had a question there that you asked. You pre-plan your questions out of interest. So in the key time, so as you said there, arrival, obviously an absolute key time for players coming in. Would you have some sort of stock questions that you might always ask, that the guys sort of listening in might go, actually, well, I could pre-plan 3 or 4 of them, and I could revert back to them all the time to help me get to know that player a little bit more?
Yeah, 100%. And we're going to go into later into like using challenges and different things. But I think often when I'm coaching, I'll have a sheet of paper folded up into 6 different bits. So it's just tucked in over my shorts or my pocket if I've got pockets. And it will be a couple of specific questions for a couple of kids that I want to get out from them. And it's not a coaching point. It's not how do you receive the ball on your back foot to go forward. It's something specific relating to whichever corner I'm working in with that child. So if it's a psychological thing, it might be a reflective question I'm asking them. Then there's, as you rightly say, James, there's also there's little questions just to trigger a conversation. If we want to really understand people, we need to be careful about how we ask a question. So if we say things with a certain tone or with a certain bias, we're almost encouraging them to give us the answer that they think we want. Whereas if you want to really get to know people, you need to ask quite an open question, or I think a planned question is definitely helpful. There's the spectrum of questions, which I'm sure Ben will be able to whiz on Google and get us and share for us. Use that myself all the time based upon who I'm working with, and it just helps. So if you're working with younger players, more closed questions, but with a little puzzle in it. With older players or more advanced thinkers, you can go to the other end and really broaden their thinking, and that goes beyond just coaching. That's general, as I say, learning and getting to know people.
Yeah, and I think, to be fair, and I usually wait to the end. Anil's, if you can see the chat function, Anil's just dropped something in which looks absolutely excellent in terms of the planning for it. Create a self-reflection plan. To allow players to identify their own strengths and weaknesses. So I'd be interested in how that went, Anil, and I'm sure the guys would be listening in. Is it every player that highlights it, and where were your comparisons, I'm guessing, between what the players thought their strengths were and what you thought? But stuff like that, I'm sure got a real good tool to use.
Yes, great question on there. Just looking at the picture, the first question is, why are you here? What motivates you to be at this football session? And I think that's probably where, like Ben's alluded to it, but we need to understand why they're coming. So why they're rocking up every Saturday morning or every Tuesday evening to be part of this session. And I think that will help us in terms of differentiation, understanding their needs and wants. So we talk quite a lot about it, and I think as coaches, we're probably guilty of focusing far too much on what we think the players need rather than actually what they want from this experience, because not all players will be there for the technical, tactical returns. Okay, some players will want to develop, some players will want to get better, but some will just want to be there to be part of that environment and the social and psychological element of it and that belonging potentially. So we've got to really think about how we get to know those players, and Ben's made some great points. And I'm really curious. I know there's not many people on, but just what kind of strategies people use on here to try and differentiate. So if anyone's got any examples, please, like we've said, please feel free to throw them in, like Anil's just done, because the more we get, the more conversation we can then have. But I just wanted to, if we just have a look, have people come across this before? The steps principle. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you'll have seen it in some guys, but it's thinking here about, if we know more about those individuals, how can we use this to support our practices? So I think an example here would be, if I'm working with space, that could be something as simple as to differentiate in the technical, tactical corner for an individual, making the space smaller so they've less space when working on receiving, less space to receive the ball, okay, or the task, they might be receiving it against more opponents. Okay, differentiating the equipment. Well, I know when myself and Ben worked in the skills program, we used to go to the sessions with a number of different size footballs. So using those to help support the differentiation. So if someone's flying, we'll go and have a go with the size 1 and see how you get on with that, rather than letting them keep going with the size 3, because it's more difficult to control, receive, judge the trajectory of the ball coming at them because it's smaller. So it's thinking about how you can use this model here, and how you support those people within your session to really kick on and develop, whether they're an absolute beginner, they've just started playing football, or whether they're the one who's been there since 5 years old and you've had them for 3, 4, 5 years now.
I'll just jump in there, Ben. You're talking about equipment. I was working with a coach just before lockdown from a local club, and it was indoor in a sports hall, so they were using futsals. But he also had a separate bag of footballs that he kept at the side. and he got it out with there was a young girl who was quite new to the session, and he got the ball out and he gave it to her, and they were all playing the game, but he specifically went over to this bag and got this ball. And when I spoke to him at the end and asked him what the idea was, the bag of footballs that he had at the side were slightly less inflated, so they would roll slower. So it was literally a bag of 6, 7, 8 footballs that he kept slightly less inflated, so that when they got a new one and they were struggling and everyone's charging around and there's all the chaos, it just slowed the ball down for them. A great little way of manipulating your equipment to help one person. Excellent.
Yeah, and I think being creative with equipment as well is key there, around how you use it, like you just alluded to, just letting some air out of a football, or playing with different footballs. So playing with futsals, so keep the ball closer to the feet, don't lose control, especially. But utilising that, if you've got it at your disposal, and how you can use it. Has anyone used the steps principle in their sessions? Can anyone give us an example of how they might use it?
Think as well, guys, I think this is becoming more prevalent, because obviously in the current situation where people are, so space is going to be quite confined. You're probably going to be, for a lot of kids, and Ben, you might be able to share how you've done it to start with. You're probably going to be given your space to say that's your space. The emphasis probably then shifts onto, well, what does the task equipment look like that can probably bring that space a little bit more to life, in terms of the current guys as to where we are potentially now. I don't know if you've got anything, Ben, where the space. So we had Chris on last week from the States, and Chris's the week before, sorry, and Chris's they'd planned out, from speaking to him, they'd planned out full pitches with just grids in, and literally a player got allocated a grid, and that was their grid. I don't know how you worked it, Ben, on the island, but space was pretty much the given to them. It's then what do we do task and equipment wise to really bring that step principle to life and really differentiate for every player.
Yeah, funny you said that about grids. We've done something very similar ourselves. So when we were planning, I know the guys on the chat were talking before about the level of planning. I think that now is more important than ever, because a lot of our go-to sessions and our go-to activities, they're out the window. You can't say, right, it's arrival time, the pitch is open, 10 games at Wembley, and then we'll go from there and we'll see what we're going to plan. It's very much, I need to know when I get there. I know I've only got a certain number of players, but also I need to know exactly what activities I'm going to run through with them, because I haven't got opportunity to let them get together and chat while I go and do other stuff. So a few things. First of all, every child at our session, when they arrived and they were greeted in the car park, were given a cone, and that was their base. So that was their base. They were given a place to go put it. They wrote their name on it, and then one at a time, when they moved to another area, that base went with them, and that was their new base. So we knew that everyone was always distantly separated. We then within all the games that we did, all the activities we did, it was prescribed areas, because you know how it is with a group of kids. If you say, right, you guys go get in a group of 4 over there in a line, you know for a fact the kids all want to get at the front of that line to get the first turn. So you've got to make sure that that's out of the window. So it's box, 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 go get in a box each. We used exactly that you're talking about there, with just a gridded pitch. We played 4v4 and 5v5 games. We were allowed 10 people, by the way, together. I think you're only allowed, is it 5 at the moment?
5 plus a couple, yeah.
Right. So we were allowed. So we had 8 kids with 2 coaches. We played 4v4, and it was literally 2x2 meter areas. 2x2 meter grids, on a football pitch, and it was as simple as, you can't go in the same square as someone else. So if I've got the ball, the only way I can travel forwards with it is if the grid in front of me is empty. If there's someone in that grid, I can't go in there. So I've got to pass it to someone else, or stay in the box that I'm in, or wait until there's another one. Tactically, and we'll go into this later on, and psychologically, there was so much going on as kids were trying to work out how to make and use space without being able to cross over each other and that kind of thing. It was really, really interesting, but we had to specify, that's your area, that's your area, that's your area. Within that, though, we then would change the equipment. So the same game would work for a group of 4 and 5-year-olds as it would with a group of 14 and 15-year-olds. In the game with 4 and 5-year-olds, we might use bean bags, and it's a case of trying to get them to a place to score in the goal with the bean bag, throwing them to each other. It might be using like big, massive footballs, with the 14 and 15-year-olds, it might be using little skills balls. We mixed it up that way. You might put more footballs in based on how the children are doing, excuse me. But whilst your space is nailed on, and it has to be at the moment, your task and your equipment are very easily manipulated. And then obviously we'll go in shortly about individual challenges and how you give a different task to certain children in the group that you've got. Dave, can you elaborate on that question? Sorry, about how you'd encourage players to differentiate.
Yeah, good evening. Yeah, sorry, I wasn't trying to trip you up or anything like that. I was just thinking while you were talking. So we talk a lot about pre-planning stuff and having a session plan, and including how we might differentiate and give tasks as coaches, etc., etc. I was just wondering that what we would maybe want to get to a point to would be maybe the kids deciding for themselves on maybe certain tasks or games where they might be able to decide for themselves maybe how easy or how hard a certain task might be for them. So which kids in your care really want to challenge themselves, because that would give you a really good insight into their mindset. Which kids might just settle for not making things either easier or harder and just sort of cruising past.
Yeah,
I just wondered what your thoughts are and what you already do to sort of, I suppose, ignite their own thoughts and deciding on where they think they might be themselves.
Yeah, I've got an example I'm going to put on in a little bit, Dave, around how you could use the same practice but differentiate and give them ownership around where they play, with the task progressively getting harder. I think looking at this from, we have to create the environment first and foremost, so they know they've got that ownership to be able to differentiate for themselves. So creating that at the start of whatever we do is crucial. So the environment needs to be set in place where they know they can come in and they've got choice around how this looks for them. Some ideas to do that could be, like you've alluded to, setting up practices with different levels. And I think you've made a great point around, you get to find out a lot more about people then around who will push and challenge and who will take the easy option. And that's where your observation skills come in as a coach, and your ability to motivate and inspire and really start challenging. Because you want to challenge these players. And I think that one of the points we're going to come on the third question is how we pitch difference and what that looks like between those who've just started, those who've been there quite a while, and those who are absolutely flying. So we'll have a little look at, but I think the ownership element's key, but we also have to help them develop that self-awareness of their own capabilities. And how we do that is crucial. So the only way we can support the development is by putting them in situations where they have to analyse their own ability, and they have to decide how hard this is or how easy this is, and can they stretch and challenge themselves with our support. Anything you want to throw in there, Ben?
Yeah, first of all, I love that it was worded as the children in your care, and I think now more than ever that's so true, isn't it? Obviously, as I said, not showing off, but we're in a situation where we're back to a little bit more activity. One of the kids who I'm coaching at the minute is 14. And my wife, just bizarre Alaman life, my wife was actually his carer when he was born. So when his mum went back to work, she was actually his full-time nanny for a year. So I've literally known this boy all his life. And when he first came back, he was completely withdrawn. So normally it's like, hey, Lewis, how you getting on? And we'll have a little bit of a chat and a bit of banter. And there was nothing, because literally he's a 14-year-old lad. He spent 3 months with no older brothers or sisters, no younger brothers or sisters. Mum and dad are both working full time. He's literally been on his own for 3 months, and his parents have done the best. There's no way a slight against them, but this has been a bizarre situation. So at that point, the only thing that was important for him was trying to bring back a little bit of self-esteem and try and get him back to being around other people, letting him have a bit of laugh and a bit of freedom, being aware of his quite fragile state. And then he was normally a kid that loves a challenge, but there was no way there was any point at that point. Sorry, there was no way there was any point at that moment in giving him any form of challenges. It was just about letting him play and letting him be a kid. That could link quite closely to the child that Ben mentioned before is only there for social reasons. So it might be that actually that kid, is there any point in giving them a technical challenge if ultimately they're there to be with the mates? You're going to be banging your head against a brick wall with that one, possibly. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, because it flips on the other side. If you've got the kid that's absolutely craving challenges, you're going to lose them if you don't give them to them. And you're going to lose them if you're not making it as tough for them as you possibly can. So to go full circle, we've got to know their motives for being there. Once you do know them, once you find out you have got that kid, I think there's quite a few different ways that you can do it. Ben's going to share some practical ways in a moment. But one thing that we try and do is we try and get the kids to think about the game away from when they're with us. So we have like player profiles, but we're working on match attacks cards at the minute. So the kids identify 4 or 5 areas of the game that are of interest to them. So it's not us telling them it's passing, dribbling, shooting. It's them identifying 4 or 5 areas of football that interest them. They then set themselves something that they are working on. Now, if they tell me they're working on something, I know that I've got permission as a result of that to go and give them a challenge and a bit of focus on it. It might not be getting better at dribbling. It might be communication and being a captain. It might be my confidence. So that then gives me opportunity to go in with that player and give them some real positive, but also individual differentiation and support.
Yeah, it's a great point, and I've kind of thrown in the chat because I wanted to see what everyone thought, and there's some good stuff coming through in the fact that you might have a group of, Ben, what's your average group size that you work currently?
Yeah, we're very fortunate. We try and have 2 coaches for a group of 12 to 16 kids.
Okay.
It's very. I think. Sorry, Ben. Go on.
No, even in that situation, can you still differentiate for every single player in that hour, 90 minutes you've got with them?
No, not at all. Not if you're effectively getting around the group and running a session and all those other things. How we do it is we have a coach who's leading the session, and we have a coach who's individually connecting with the kids. So it might be that James is leading the session, and it's a session on building up from the back, and that's his session that he's leading. And then Ben, you're going to be in supporting 1, 2, or 3 key players, whether that's in a social corner element, whether it's a technical thing on the pitch, but you're working with 2 or 3 players. You can affect every player within a session, but differentiating a game for 16 different people is unrealistic.
Yeah, I mean, my take on it is if you try and do it for all 16, you kind of spin in plates and you spend all your time trying to make sure that individual is been challenged enough or been stretched beyond their capabilities. So I think Dave's made a great point, and Nick and Alan, about maybe focusing on 2 or 3 individuals within each session, maybe within an area, once you know more about them, that's aligned to your outcome of that session. So having a generic outcome for the group, but then having individual outcomes. And I don't know if anyone does this currently. It's something that we use in the academy system around each player will have an IDP, an individual development plan. So they'll have a specific area that they want to look to develop, and they know that for themselves. So how we then put that into sessions is supporting them with that. So working with 2 coaches, it might be in 1 week we identify 3 players who fit in with the theme of, for example, I don't know, finishing the attack we're looking at. So scoring in, it might be a crossing and finishing type approach. 3 players, 4 players who might fit into that. 1 coach will lead the session. The other coach will work with the 4 players on a differentiation basis to really support their development. So if you are working with supporting coaches, which most people have the luxury of that, okay, a lot of people don't, and they're working on their own. But how can you utilise the people you're working with to really support this differentiation process? And I'm pretty sure you've just alluded to it, Ben. What you do is you've 2 coaches. 1 will lead, 1 will kind of ghost coach or support individuals within that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we probably, it's an area we probably haven't really got into as well as we could have done, or maybe as much as we could have done, is how to work with another coach. I know it's something that the first time I came across it was when I went to the degree, and I've been coaching for 7 or 8 years by that point. And I was like, oh, yeah, I've never really thought about that. How do you actually work with someone else? Do you plan who's going to do what? Or is it just, we stand there and we both commentate throughout the session, and we both offer all our advice and ideas at the same time. As simple as I'm leading the session, you're asking questions of these three kids. Helps with our understanding of whose responsibilities are what, and it'll help the kids as well understand. Right, James is leading the session, so I know that he's going to tell me how to do it and what the progressions are and those bits and pieces. Ben's in specifically working with those three players, and I think that'll help the guys that you're working with as well. Just on that then, who was it? It was Alan. Alan said about grouping players. So, is anyone's thoughts on how they group their players within their sessions? Is it based upon a physical thing? Is it a technical thing? Is it something else? So, as an example, Alan's just said there, strivers, copers, and forging ahead. So, do we have the same game 3 times? One for the strivers, one for the copers, one for those that are forging ahead. So that could be a method of doing it. It could be that we go, right, we've got this group of 4 or 5 players who are technically really, really good. So we're going to put them together. And we've got these 3 giants over here. So we're going to put them on that pitch and they're going to play together. So is that the sort of thing we're talking about there around grouping players?
I suppose as well, Ben, on that, it probably depends on what you want to achieve as to how you group the players. So I know, Bateman was on a few years ago and a few weeks ago now, and I can remember a conversation with him a long time ago now when he was taking the team, and I'm sure they grouped theirs by birth date, and he grouped these into sort of 3 groups. So it was 4 groups, sorry, right across the birth date of the year. And they just decided that rather than looking at ability at all, they would look at birth dates. And some of his feedback around it was excellent around how the players had progressed, aligned with currently where they are now. I suppose, back to my original point, it probably depends on what you want to achieve as to where you start to group players and how you group them. And probably the caveat or the health warning comes with that is, do we always group them in the same group, or do we mix them up depending on what we want to try and achieve?
I think that's a great point, James, and I think we have to get a balance here around when we're working with our group, how we group them and why we group them specifically. Because you might have players, and Alan quite rightly is putting there about you've got your strivers, your copers, and ones who are forging ahead. That might be different across the 4 corners, or even within the technical tactical corner. You might have someone who's absolutely flying in terms of dribbling and manipulating the ball, but really striving to keep up when it comes to, I don't know, for example, passing or sharing it with others. So it's thinking around how you do that and how you get the balance. And also, I'm a big believer in if we group players, so for example, if I put all my strivers together, all my copers, all my forging ahead in 3 separate groups, I think probably the gap will probably widen, because the ones that are forging will push each other. So how do we then get those that are striving to see what that's like playing against? Because come Sunday or Saturday, whenever the games program is, the ones that are striving to keep up are going to have to play against those forging ahead at some point in some capacity. So how do we help them understand what that looks like, and almost a little bit of peer-to-peer learning? How can we give those that are forging ahead those social, psychological skills of playing with players who might not be the same level of ability, but they can support in different ways? Or it might be, do you know what, it's a lot harder for me now because I'm playing on a team where I've got to do a little bit more getting on the ball in. So it's finding the balance that I find. I don't know how you find it, Ben, but just trying to manage that and how you support players within it.
Yeah, the reason I asked the question is because I'm interested in what people's thoughts on it. Quite often I find when I speak to people, it's we make a decision based upon a physical appearance or who the best player is. And actually, there's a lot more to it than that. There's a lot more we can go into. So we think about Leo Messi, and generally he's going to play in the middle of the pitch, top end. Generally, he's going to play against 2 big centre backs. So if he's going to be successful on the pitch, he's got to know how to deal with the ball under pressure from 2 big centre backs. So if we split kids physically, where is that small child or less developed person going to gain the opportunity to deal with the ball and learn how to deal with the ball under pressure from bigger players? Messi's great at getting his arm in underneath the arm of his opponent into the rib cage. How's he learnt that? By playing against bigger players and knowing if he tries to go arm to arm with them, he's getting knocked out of the way. Likewise, the bigger fellas have got to learn how to get around someone who's nippy and can twist and turn and change direction quick. If I get too close to him, he's just going to spin past me. So from a technical perspective, there's a lot to learn about playing and mixing up physique. But right there, we're talking about a couple of kids whose motivation is being a good footballer. And that's, again, about understanding the kids you've got. I'll share a video in a minute. There's a session that we did last week. All of our questions were focused towards one kid to try and help him with his area that he wants to get better at, which is being a better captain for his team. So all of our questions within the session were focused at him to share openly with the rest of his group. Now, for him to gain that confidence to share and speak and feedback to other people, he needs to have a variety of different situations that he's put in. So he needs to be the voice around the players that he's better than, in his perspective. That will give him that confidence. But he also then needs to be able to do it with the players that are better than him, or when they're losing a game, or when they're struggling. Because if he's going to be a good leader, he needs to be able to do it all the time. So in terms of how we group kids, I think we can go into it in as much depth as we want. But Alan said a few minutes ago in the chat box, it's about knowing what you're trying to achieve. If I just throw a little in with 3 big uns and say, right, off you go, and away, I'll go off to another group, and I'm not supporting him and explaining to him why we're doing it, then we're probably going to have a little problem.
You touched on a great point there, kind of been holistic with that 4-corner approach as well, because even though you talked about the leadership stuff socially, it's that understanding of the psychological element of how to communicate and when to communicate and why to communicate with certain individuals. So helping them develop that holistic kind of person and player rather than just the tech physical stuff. So no, great point.
With Graham's question there, is Graham willing to come on the mic and just elaborate on that a little bit?
Hi, you all right?
Hi, Graham.
Yeah, just, I don't know, it's something that I kind of noticed in my teaching, like my day job. Sometimes I find the most effective way of kind of trying to differentiate is just from setting something up to start with and then kind of really just seeing how people react to it. So kind of from a footballing point of view or coaching point of view, it might just be playing a game with a couple of challenges in. The kids will arrive and we'll just give them bibs kind of as they come in. There won't be any sort of, we won't have pre-planned who's playing with who or anything like that. But me and the other coach might use the first 10, 15 minutes just to see what's working. So are the teams balanced, or is there 1 or 2 changes we can make? And then from there, we might get some feedback from the players, or we might sort of use our own judgment and just tweak things from there. And yeah, I suppose just trying to use the first part of a session to see what's needed, and then try to differentiate from there.
Thanks, Graham. I think that is so good. Thinking about the person and where they are on that day. I've come to your session on Tuesday night. I've had an absolute terrible day at school. I've been outside the head's office because I was misbehaving at break time. I've then had maths this afternoon and I'm terrible at maths. I get to your session. Do I really want a coach now really stretching me and pushing me, or do I just want a bit of freedom just to play? Even though I'm that kid that normally would really want to be stretched and really pushed. Equally, I've had a class day. I was playing football at lunchtime and I scored 3 goals, and it's the first time I've ever played with year 6. And I'm absolutely flying. I've had a session and I'm all over getting challenged and getting pushed and getting stretched. So I think what Graham said there, I think that's magic. So as much as we plan and we've got best intentions, we still need to remember we're coaching people with their own experiences and lives outside of our lovely pitch that's set up with fantastically lined up cones. Thanks, Graham.
Thank you.
So what I'll do is, guys, I'm just gonna. I mean, I've put all this together, but it feels like we've covered quite a lot of it. Ben, I don't know what you think.
Yeah. Do you want to jump to your session plans, and we'll go into that a little bit, because I think was it Anil at the very start talked about challenge and competition, and I think we're at a good place to have a little look at that.
Yeah, just give me a sec. There we go. We got that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is an example of. I think we talked about. Oh, what's happening here? That won't move. Right. Can you all see my screen? Am I still up? Brilliant. So I think if we look at any type of practice, we can always change a game through manipulating the step principle, support players of all abilities. So what I kind of put together here is, and I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. I'm just trying to show you ideas around how it might look, aimed at working with foundation phase players. So transferring the ball from one side to the other without the defenders winning the ball. Okay, so working on different types of practices. So we look here around, well, level 1 might be you play with a friend and you play 2v1. Okay, so that the challenge isn't as hard because there's one defender trying to get the ball from you. As we go towards level 2, well, now you play 2v2, and that can be differentiated further into defenders. The Blues could be locked into half a pitch, depending on the ability of players. And then level 3 could be, do you know what? Here's my strivers. They're going to play 1 against 3, but the defenders are locked in. So differentiating the practice of how you penetrate, how you attack and get to the other side, but in 3 different stages. So if I was working with a group there of, what we got, 12, I could have 3 different practices going on for different players, and even give some ownership to players around within that group. So what level do you want to play? Or even challenge them to, okay, you have to start at level 1, but as soon as you've done it successfully 3 times, you can bump up to level 2. So your your forgers ahead straight away will be up at level 2, those that can do it. So it's thinking about how we do that. So I'm keen to get, because it was literally something just thrown together, that any thoughts around that? Would that be something you could do within your sessions in terms of setting practices up and the design of the practice? Okay. And Ben, anything you want to throw in there as well that you've spotted?
Yeah, I think we've become very good, I think, at understanding the importance of ball mastery and doing loads and loads and loads of 1v1 stuff. But quite simple differentiation is to have a 2v1 with both of the 2 having the ball. So in Ben's picture there, the 2 red players both having a ball. Because ultimately, 2v1 means there will be times where the defender is distracted by the other person and you can attack the space. Whereas if you do 1v1 all the time, there's kids that just aren't ready for that. They can't master the ball well enough. They can't roll it and stop it. They can't change direction quickly enough. So even if you're doing a dribbling session and you've got the best intentions of having the kids on the ball loads and loads and loads, a 2v1 rather than a 1v1 is massively, massively important, or beneficial rather. Equally, within that practice, if you've got 2v1 and you're one as a kid who's had a growth spurt and therefore they're a little bit all over the place coordination wise, or it's your big defender who's got it in his head that his job is just to clear the ball and then get back and ready to defend again. If you give the blue player, the defender, a ball and now say, right, you can only win their ball if you've got your ball, or you can only tag the 2 lads that are in red if you've got your ball, then now you're working on that blue player mastering the ball while they're a defender. And that's just where you understand a little bit around the individuals that you've got. So even though this session was on passing and receiving, I suppose, something like that, Ben?
Yeah, passing and receiving, yeah.
Yeah, so you might, even within that, you can have your blue central defender that's number 1 in level 1 there. That child is still working on ball mastery because that's something that's important to that child. It might be a striver. It might be someone that's struggling. It's just a chance to get them more time on the ball.
Yeah, and I think the way I've looked at it is quite rightly, as James has mentioned in the chat, that gamification of level 1, level 2, level 3, and how we can relate to what young people nowadays relate to, effectively link into, so that gaming model of I've got to get past level 1 to get to level 2. Okay, and thinking, how can we give them ownership here? How can we give them the fact to go away? And do you know what? I think the hardest thing for us as coaches, and I've been guilty of this in the past, is actually giving them the options to play here, level 1, level 2, level 3, and letting them go away, and then stopping the group and going, no, you shouldn't be playing level 3. You need to start at level 1. Well, why not let them have a go and figure out how difficult level 3 is, and then let them regress and go backwards? And I've seen it quite a lot of times when working with the skills program, working with in schools specifically, because we think about working with schools. You've got 30 kids, all with different motivations, but they have to do PE. It's part of the national curriculum. And all of a sudden, Ben's turned up with a bag of footballs and he's delivering footballs here. So how then do I differentiate for a group of 30 mixed ability children to get the same outcomes and support them? And it's thinking about letting them, and I think we get this in his head that, if it's too hard, they'll really struggle. Well, no, they'll figure out it's too hard. Give them a little bit more credit that they're intelligent. They'll figure out it's too hard. And if they can't figure that out, we need to step in and support and maybe use questioning and a bit of feedback to help them understand the process. But just an example, like I said, I didn't want to come in and reinvent the wheel and throw loads of stuff at you. It's just something to get you thinking around how you could structure your practices to really encourage differentiation. Another example, all I've done there is change the task, could change the space. So some areas might be bigger than others, might have 3 different sized areas. So making it harder in terms of making the space more constricted, making it wider, making it longer, depending on what you're wanting to achieve from the practice. People, so if you notice someone's really, really, really struggling and you probably need to give them some armbands, get them out of that practice, get them into another one. Does it matter if the numbers become odd? No, because we can figure out how to play the practice in a different way to really support the individuals within that group. So I think it's good, and I think, Ben, you've made a great point there around I've set it up with a certain outcome in mind, but you've just looked at it and gone, actually, I could use that for a different outcome, because the practice design is almost simple, so to speak, and it's trying to get them to think about it. But I love your point, Alan, just going off on a little bit here. 100% agree with this in terms of how do we help players understand how to receive to dribble in the many different situations they'll get in the game. So again, the task, you're right, a lot of dribbling practices will start with a player dribbling towards someone without receiving it or getting the ball from anywhere. So again, differentiate the task. Can the ball come from different variables to get it into the pitch? How do you receive it? How do you play?
I think as well, Ben, on that, we tend to, with our practices as well, I don't know what your thoughts are, certainly from what I've seen, is we start from the bottom and move up. So we always start with basic, and then we progress, and we build our session, or usually our hour, around starting or we might have some sort of arrival, but starting basic. And that's certainly the thing I've been saying to a lot of coaches now is, why not start with what level 10 would be? And what we do is we find our way. Some might stay, some might drop, some might advance. But yeah, I think we tend to waste a lot of time by starting at the very bottom. When we only get the kids potentially for an hour a week, it's probably 20-30 minutes of time that actually we could do with being at level 5, level 6 before we've done that way. So I think that certainly, when you're looking at that practice design, the key is, well, actually, I don't have to start at level 1 because none of my group might. Yeah,
and Alan's put a great point in the group there around just starting with what they've come to play, starting with the game, because I think Graham made the great point around, we'll put them in a game, well, brilliant, you can see where they're at, and that can help you then in terms of making decisions for coaching within that session with individuals, and how you differentiate the practices. See if they can do it within what they'll play on a Saturday or a Sunday, because that's ultimately what they want to do. They want to play the game. How can we help them understand how to play the game is the key element of what we're doing in terms of coaching. But I think you've made a great point. I don't know if you've got anything to throw in, Ben. You're itching to get something in here.
I'm like, there's been like 3 or 4 things said. I'm just like, it's like trying to jump in, but I'm just trying to be polite. Pete Sturgis said a number of years ago at an FA skills event to us that we so often we assume kids can't. rather than assume kids can. Like, if we didn't exist, there's no such thing as coaching, kids would still play football. So we don't need to strip it back to 2 kids passing the ball backwards and forwards. They can still play football without us. So I think that what James said there about starting at level 10, why not start at level 10? It's still a simple game. We're not making it a complicated game. It's a simple game. We're just making it difficult to do. And then we go, right, let's see where we can go back to. Sorry, I've just spotted there. Jackie said exactly that. We underestimate what kids can do. So it's a simple game. It's 5 people against 5 people trying to score in the opposition's goal. The game itself really simple, just like Ben's practices there. But it's going to be really, really tough because the constraint we're going to put on it is you've got to keep the ball for 20 seconds before you score. If we can't keep it for 20 seconds after playing for 15 minutes, let's have a chat with the kids and find out why not, what we could do to tweak it or reduce it a little bit if that's what they want. In planning this, we talked about who do we find it easiest to differentiate for? Is it those that are striving to keep up with us? Is it the big group in the middle? Or is it the ones that the big top flyers, the ones at the end? Personally, I know Ben and I had a chat about this. We think, and you're more than welcome to disagree, that the easiest thing to do is differentiate and look after those ones at the bottom. They're the easiest ones to look after because we just give them an extra ball or we give them an extra big space. Actually, the ones that we also need to give equal time thinking about is the ones right at the top. How are we going to challenge them and make sure they keep getting better and they don't just level out or fortunately get to a place where they're a really good player? So if we make it really tough to start with, all we've got to do is go back a level, tell everyone else. The other bit I wanted to add on, I've just put that video in. You're welcome to watch that at your own leisure rather than going through. It's only a 20-second video, but it's Ben's level 2 there. It's a 2v1v1 or a 2v2 to score. And that's the game that we use with the whole group. So everyone played 2v2. For one pitch, we gave them the choice of what to do with the defenders, and they said they'd do it exactly how Ben's done it there, 1 in each half. And then to challenge the stronger players technically in that group, we said that they had to keep it for 10 seconds before they could score. So they've then got to deal with a different problem within the same game. That was all it was. Another child who's physically more developed than a lot of the kids that he's playing with, we had a little condition for him around not being able to use his physique to beat a player. So it's that classic one where if it's me against someone that's a lot smaller than me, which there's not many people that are, then I'm just going to knock it past him and run. So then we talk about, right, we're going to make it harder for him to be able to get success. So the only way you can go across the halfway line to the attacking half is if you stop the ball on the halfway line first. So how is it to keep the ball nice and close and find a way to cleverly or trickily beat the opponent before it goes into the attacking half? It's a simple game with just a little tweak that we've introduced for individual kids. And I know right at the start, Neil talked about challenging kids. That's all that is, isn't it? Just giving them a specific challenge relevant to them.
Yeah, I think you've made some great points, and I think practice design. I think we're coming back to it again. We're kind of going around full circle. It's so key for differentiation and how you structure your practice to support all those within the group, however many that is. But also even now more so with what we've got going on with the current climate. We won't mention the pandemic, but 5 in a group. How are you going to differentiate your sessions to encompass those 4 corners? So how are you going to get your tech returns? How are you going to get your physical returns? How are you going to get your psych and your social? And it's kind of key. We need to start being a little bit more creative with practice design. And in the planning of this, me and Ben got a little bit carried away and started talking about different practices we might plan, and this is what it might look like. And I'm thinking ahead of myself, thinking social distancing, but how can I get them in a game? Something, could I do a table football session where they're locked in areas? And we just need to start thinking a little bit around what that's going to look like now and how we're going to differentiate. But there's some great points. I personally feel, and differentiation happens at every level. So it's not just grassroots. I work in an academy setup, and we have to differentiate within that because of the mixture of different kids we've got in the group. Because at the end of the day, I work with a group of under 10s. They're still children. So there's going to be huge differences across the board, across the 4 corners. So we have to work with that, and we have to support them around how we can help them understand the bigger picture and how we can develop them. So examples are, we've got a kid who's technically, tactically excellent, but physically needs a lot of work on the ABC movement pattern, physical literacy type stuff. So the amount of practices we put them in that are in tight areas where they have to make short, sharp movements and have to get away from people. So dodging, tagging games as arrival activities. We throw them into it and we let them not struggle, but we let them know this is what it's like and this is hard work. You've got to figure a situation out here to get away from this and solve the problem. So practice design is key. And I think it all comes back to, if I can flick back on this slide, can I? Yeah, we can go backwards, can we? Oh, there we are, we can't hit the button work. So that's what we've got in our session. Okay, that's what you'll have. You'll have all different types of people. If you look there, you've got some on their own, you've got some hanging on down at the bottom here, just about hanging on in the session. You've got some who are falling. Please don't let the kids fall. Yeah, create the support network and the blanket underneath them. You've got some who are there with the mates. So it's a real good way, I find, to look at the group. You've got some top of the tree thinking, yeah, I'm the best person here. You've got to manage all that within one session, and it's not an easy job. Right, and it never will be because of the different people you've got coming to you. But we also need to, if we look at like we mentioned, it's come out already from the guys in the group. Those who are striving to keep up, those who are coping, those who are forging ahead. How do we really support all of them within the session? And I think you've made a great point, Ben. And there's a lot of there's a bit of research around it in education at the minute in terms of, do we sometimes forget about those that are striving ahead or not give them as much attention as we should because we're trying to stop those who are striving to keep up from falling that far behind. I think it's something we probably need to think about in football as to how we really push and challenge those at the top end and where we can push them to. So putting them in situations where it's 1v3, or even if they're technically tactically flying, how can we really stretch them psychologically? So putting them in situations where they have to be resilient, they have to have the motivation to continue. It's going to be hard work. They have to solve problems, figure their way out of situations. Okay, anything you want to throw in there, Ben?
Yeah, I'm going to nick Anil's suggestion, to be honest with you, because he's hit some gold dust there. So giving the kids that ownership. So let's go back to planned questions. If you've got a kid that you know is a striver, and maybe that kid is more knowledgeable about the game than what you are, no problem with that. You don't have to be Pep to coach a 10-year-old. But maybe you say to that kid, plan question, what can I do to make this as difficult for you as possible? Well, if he really wants to be challenged, or she's really a striver and she's really keen for that, she'll come back with something that helps you. So Neil's idea there about give them the cones, right? Can you make an area that's going to make this game really difficult for you? Within the game, you've got to find a way to beat these two players to score. Can you tell me what I can do to make it really difficult for you to get success? Straight away now, think about being that child where not only are you owning what's happening, think about how that's going to affect you when it goes wrong. Well, this is what I did to myself, so I better have another go. And that's where Ben mentioned before about the environment. That's where you as a coach, you're in your crumb there. You've got to make sure you jump in and go, it's okay, keep trying. Remember why we're doing this. You want to get better at dribbling, or you want to get better at your first touch. So you can definitely, as Anil says there, put the ownership on them, but do it in a way where it's planned and it's organised. So prepare your question, prepare your challenge, make this as hard for yourself as possible. What are you going to do? You might, one of the coaches that I'm working with at the minute did this last week. At the end of the session, they'd been working on creating chances to score. He got them all to do a little voice memo of what they found most difficult about creating chances to score. So now he's got in his locker for next time he sees the kids, a little voice memo that they've created, what they find difficult. Play it to them next week and say, right, what are we going to do to help you with that today? Send it to them tonight on the parents group that you've got. Say, ask your child how they're going to get better at this. So you can put the ownership back on them, and they then will come to you with solutions or answers or ideas that you can then use to your advantage. We don't have to have all the answers ourselves. James, you're about to say something there, pal?
No, I like it. I like the idea around that. It sort of comes back to where we're currently at, I suppose. Certainly over here in this connection. And before we even start playing, it's that how do we pick up where we left off? So what were the players currently doing that they really were really enjoying? what were the players currently doing that they were struggling with, and a little thing around the voice memo and giving that voice diary just allows that connection to come back. I think certainly it hit home for me with Sally's session was around this, even before we get these kids back in playing now. And I know, Ben, you're a little bit ahead of us here, but what are the things that we're doing to reconnect and bring back to life that football's still there? Obviously not in its current guise, but it is still there. Or do we expect players just to walk back in and feel like they've not been away? For some, potentially will. But I think you mentioned earlier on, and I know certainly the rationale behind Jackie's stuff, who's on the call, why they're doing what they're doing is because they will potentially have players that you gave the example, Ben, earlier, that were anxious. Jackie will have those players. That's just representative of where they currently are. So them little things around voice notes, I love them little things where you can sort of reconnect that way, which is a little bit 21st century rather than a text message or off the parents who, let's be honest, they could say anything back to you. It's real authentic.
Make no mistake, it was a 21-year-old's idea, so very much out of
there
touch
you are.
Me.
And do you know what? Sometimes that's the best thing. When we asking the kids, I know Neil said there, asking the kids, I can guarantee you that some of the kids will come up with better games than what we've had planned. I always tend to think we have a stock list of games that we enjoy because they're easy to put on, or we think the kids like them, but also the ones that we played when we were young players. So certainly having them games with the kids come up with, for me, is absolutely key.
Yeah, just something to throw in there, because I know this isn't my idea, by the way. I'm kind of magpieing here a little bit, but I'll throw it in. There's a club in the northeast who, I think it's every third or fourth Friday in the month, have games night, where the foundation phase players all come together and they pick the practices and they design the practices. They've got the whole 3G book for 2 hours. The kids just come and play, and they play with different age groups. They play with different kids. They've got the choice to go play in different practices if they want. And it's just basically back on them. And we talked earlier about the needs and wants of the players. I think we're very good at meeting needs as coaches, but do we need to be a little bit better at meeting the wants and giving them sometimes what they want? Do they want the free play? And how can we structure that? So it's an idea you might be able to set back with your clubs around. Could it be that you've got that facility or that space later down the line, once we've eased the social distancing type stuff, to have that in place, where you could have some kind of game sessions? Another idea is, if you've got a group at a club, if you've got your 7s, 8s and 9s all together training on Saturday morning, is there anything wrong one Saturday morning with getting all 3 groups together and grouping them off into different groups, depending on ability, physical size, maturation? So really trying to differentiate that way and give those who... So, for example, I watched a lot of football. I coached a lot of football at Grassroots with the coach education, but going and watching games, especially when doing level 2s, going and watching an under-7 game, and coach saying to me, "Oh, he's phenomenal, he's that lad, isn't he? Or that girl's really good." I'm like, well, they're about 2 foot bigger than the rest. Technically, they need to do a lot of work to stay where they're at, because physically they're getting away with it at the minute. And it's that understanding of how we can then support them. So that player in particular could probably do with playing up an age group, or being challenged by training up an age group, or playing with different players. So it's thinking about how we can be creative within our own environments as well, so to really support player development and this differentiation approach. Anything you've got there, Ben, that you've tried on that front?
Yeah, certainly a lot of exactly what you're saying there around different ways of mixing kids up, and it doesn't always have to be that you've identified, right, this is what we're going to do and why we're going to do it. So what you've said there around just mixing up 3 different age groups and letting them have games together, then that in itself is going to give the kids developmental opportunities that they wouldn't have if it was just the under-12s together, the under-13s together, the under-14s together. But then on the side of that, you might have 1 or 2 kids that socially you want to get them, you want to get them acting as captains, or you might have a couple of kids that physically they're more developed, so you want to mix them in with the older ones and see how they cope with that. So it's almost like a little test for you to observe. I've just lost my next order, started mowing the grass. I've just lost my train of thought there. Apologies. Just to go back to what you said about restarting back, we had when we started back, we had 2 kids who they do futsal together with us on a Friday night. The last session before lockdown was the Friday night. We got locked down that night, and then they didn't see each other for 3 months. So when we came back after 3 months, it was just like they literally hadn't spoke to each other. It was the most amazing thing. They were just like trying to keep them apart for that first session, just so they could sit and chat to each other. That ultimately was all they wanted. So when Ben said there about free play, how often do we let them just play and then give them the option for a little bit more? So I remember talking to a guy a little while, a couple of years ago, and he would have 2 pitches set up. One was, this is where you get coached. This is where you just play. So we're all gonna start here. When you're ready for a bit of a session, come over here and we'll do a little bit of a session. And then anytime you want, just put your hand up and you go back over to the pitch and just play again. That way, you know that when you've got the kids on the pitch where they want a bit coached, you know that they're there because they want a little bit of coaching around whatever it is. Another method that we've tried to use is having little challenge cards at the side of the pitch. So you're just playing a 4v4 game or a 6v6 game or a 2v2 game. At any time where a kid is comfortable or just fancies a challenge, come out, identify a challenge and go, right, that's the next thing I'm going to try. And it might be to use a split pass to create a chance for your mate before you're allowed to score again. It might be to only use your right foot for the next 10 minutes. So they choose a little challenge card, they come out, they have a go at it, and then at the end of it, they can either stick with it, or they can come and ask you for some advice, or they can just continue and carry back on with the session. One last thing I want to share is something that Graham, who used to work with the FA, he did a thing last year where he had 4 different colour bibs, and the kids chose the bib that they wanted was ultimately what they wanted from the session. So if they wanted a green bib, that meant just let me go. So don't coach me tonight. I just want to play. A red bib meant come and have a chat to me at some point tonight. So it was at some point, like just come and chat to me. And the orange bib meant it was around challenge me tonight. So they played their 3v3 matches or their sessions or whatever. If that child didn't want you to step in and physically coach them or give them a challenge, they wore a green bib, they were just free to go then. If they wanted a bit of a chat about something, they could stick a red bib on, and that was then a chance to have a little sit down chat with you during the session or later on. And the orange one was, right, push me tonight, give me a challenge, make it tough, whatever it is.
Yeah, you made some good points there, Ben. I like that around. Even within, you just talked about games there. Even within games, we can differentiate. You could have a 5v5, 6v6 mixed ability game going on, and it's still working. You're still working with individuals within that framework. So it could be that you've got a player who's absolutely outstanding, will get the ball, beat everyone with the dribbling ability and score loads of goals. What they're not so good at, or what they're missing at the minute, is their ability to receive it and share it with someone when they need to share it. So it could be to support them and try and help their understanding and decision making. It could be something around, you can only play on 2 touch. So they have to receive it, they have to share it, then get it back off somebody. So getting them to think about when and where to do that and help them understand. And I think the conditions you use have to be realistic. They have to be relevant to the individual, and they have to provide them with lots of repetition to practice what they want or what they need. I think that's the key there. So figuring out why you're using certain constraints and certain conditions with individuals is key, without taking away their super strength of being able to dribble past everyone and put it in the top bin.
What do you mean by super strength, Ben? Sorry.
So what I think sometimes with differentiation as well, we probably focus too much on what they're not so good at, rather than actually they're absolutely phenomenal at this. If you take that away from them, are you restricting their full potential? So if we've got a player who loves beating players 1v1, but all of a sudden he's doing that too much, tell you what, I'll take him away for it for a few weeks. You can only pass it all the time, or are we going to restrict them? Are we going to help them become as good as what they potentially could be? Because we need some more dribblers. We need some exciting players.
Yeah, and definitely I'll jump in on here because I know it's a story that's stuck with me for ages since, and he works now with Ben Hardaker. So Andy Foster, who's now the head of coaching at Leeds, I can remember him once saying to us, I think it was on a course that I was on with him, and he told the story about how he was there were some people on the sidelines that the coach kept telling them to pass the ball all the time. And Anne turned around to the coach and thought it was excellent and said, I know, because imagine if he turned out like Lionel Messi. And I thought it just hit the nail on the head that actually where are our super strengths and what do we do to continue to enhance the super strength rather than just taking it away all the time. So yeah, it's stuck with me ever since that, around that super strength stuff.
Yeah, and I think wherever you're coaching, you're taking these players on a journey, and it's where you, how far can you take them is a key question, and it all depends on their motivation. I think what we've not got to get into or fall into the trap of as coaches, and I've been guilty of it throughout my career, is making sure that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, and that we're not trying to appeal to the masses. We're really trying to develop individuals within this group. So we're trying to develop the group as a whole, but the individuals within that will support that development of the group. And I think if we just talk about players and individual players, I don't know if anyone's ever seen this, but this is Gareth Bale in a period of 10 years. When we talk about managing the difference and how he came through a system. So I'll give you a bit of clarity around it. So that's Gareth Bale at 14, 15 at Southampton, where he almost got released from the academy setup. So very slight. Physicality was his biggest issue. Not physically developed enough to play in the academy system. Won't make it as a professional footballer. Fast forward 21 years. To 21 years. He's still in. He's professional footballer. But that was when he was at Spurs, playing at left back, not quite terrorising Maicon yet and giving him nightmares. But nearly got sold to Blackburn. The only reason he didn't get sold to Blackburn was the volcanic ash cloud that covered most of Europe that stopped him flying to sign the paperwork. Spurs were playing in Europe. Okay. Fast forward another 4 years, and look at the physical development in that period of time. How he's gone from potentially been written off here because of his physicality to where he is now when he's fully matured and grown. I sometimes think we don't probably consider this enough across the four corners and give players enough time to fully develop. So it's a really interesting picture, and I always kind of look at this around when we're working with young players, and even there in the YDP phase, 12 to 16s, it's not necessarily about the here and now, it's about what's the next 5, what's the next 10 years look like for that player, and where are they going to go depending on the motivation, the environment they're in. Yeah, any thoughts, Ben, James?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent slide to link to what we were just talking about there. Did anyone look at Gareth Bale at 14, 15, 16 years old and think he'd look like he did at 25? Did anyone know at 10 years old what he was going to look like at 21? Did we focus on the areas of his game that were missing and lacking, or did we really make sure that his super strength, which has always been his speed and attacking and being direct, has that always been what's been a common thread throughout his development, and they've made sure that continues to be his super strength? And I would suggest, without any knowledge of the clubs that we're talking about and the coaching staff there, I would suggest that focus on his super strength whilst trying to help him with other areas is what's probably got him to where he's got to. We talk a lot about working on our weaker foot. Don't see Messi using his right foot that often, really. I'd say his left foot's definitely his super strength, and he doesn't do too badly with it. So do we want to spend just as much time on our right foot, or do we want to make sure that our left foot, which is already pretty good, becomes as good as it possibly can be? And then there's the motivational thing around, if we want to keep people in the game and we want to keep kids, as Dave used the word ignited before, if we want to keep them ignited and passionate about playing football, do we always want to talk to them about the things that are lacking and missing and damp, or do we want to talk to them about the fantastic things that they can do and what they're really good at? Maybe we use other people to make it harder for them to do it well. So we go back to that group of social kids that are just there for social reasons. Let's get them to team up and make it really tough for him to use his left foot, or make it really tough for him to dribble and beat us. So we're going to use those kids with that social focus that want to be working together. We're going to use that to our advantage. I think we can probably be a bit clever with stuff, but I think, Ben, you've hit on a massively important point there about superpowers and about concentrating on what we're good at and what we've got that's in our locker that makes us who we are.
Yeah, I think we do it as coaches as well, if I'm being honest. I I think as coaches, when we're looking at our own development, we probably focus too much on what we need to get better at rather than actually what do we bring to the party. And I think that's probably where it comes from. As a culture in this country, we're quite negative. It's what are they not so good at rather than actually what are they good at. Like let's focus on what these young players we've got in front of us are really good at and continue to develop that, but also try and bring the other areas of the game up with that at the same time. And that's the kind of conundrum. And I don't think there's not a magic spell or a crystal ball for it really. It's a difficult one. It's the craft of us as coaches that's got to make that happen. Because we've ultimately how we put ourselves across as coaches, the environments we create, the practice designs, everything associated with it will support that young player's development in some way or another.
Yeah, bang on. We're probably coming towards the end now, I imagine, Reedy. Has anyone got anything that's burning in the back of the mind about differentiation, or anyone thinking, hang on, this is all well and good, but because there's only a few of us on here, this is a really good opportunity to get some real specific thoughts and ideas. Is anyone still there? It's just us three.
I'm there, boys. Don't worry. I'm here. What I was thinking was, so from when we started, how many coaches pre-planned to differentiate in the session plans, or whether it may be that they write stuff down, and how many are then after this think, yeah, do you know what, so and so, I need to do this and that with them, or whatever it may be. And just going back to Alan's point, because I didn't think we picked up too much on that about the almost and some. So that's a really good way of when you're doing a session plan as a coach, and making it more specific to some individuals. When planning, thinking, right, well, all of them can achieve this, then some can do this, or it might even be back to individuals. A one person might be able to achieve this. So I just wondered whether people who are on the call already do that, and if they don't, will they start to? Am I here on my own again?
It was a great point that Alan made, and I think Alan, if you're willing, great if you could just explain a little bit more some of the guys around the almost summon and what you kind of thought with that, because it was kind of a double-edged sword in that you used it in teaching but not sure how it might fit, or would it fit. Understand if not. Oh, got something in the chat. Most plans do, Jackie. Most plans go out the window. I think the almost sum is, in terms of looking at it from an educational perspective, the almost sum is there to differentiate your group effectively around. Everybody should be able to do this. Most will be able to do this, but some will be able to do this. And you've got to be really clear with what the almost and some is, and the group have to understand it. So I think here language is important, especially if you're working with younger players, around what exactly you want them to achieve from that session. But helping them understand that, what that looks like in football, you could probably relate that more to football terminology. I don't know how, but maybe Premier League, Champions League, Europa League type stuff. If you're in the Premier League, you can do this. If you're in the Europa League, you can do this. But if you're in the Champions League, you're flying, you can do this. And that getting them to kind of pitch themselves there and linking into like their idols and players. So Ben sent me some videos of the sessions like he shared in the group. And we need to have a word with that kid, Ben, with the Man United top with Wan-Bissaka on the back. All the players at Man United, and he gets that. Hey? Yeah, so thinking about who their heroes are, how can we relate them to that and get them motivated? I think that's the key when you're managing the difference. Are they motivated enough to help you manage the difference as well? Do they want to get better at what you want them to get better at?
Yeah, it goes back to what we said at the start about understanding the individuals and why they're there. So, just on that kid with Wan-Bissaka on a Man United top, he's also ironically a Scotland fan and got a Robertson on the back of one. So I think he's a closet red, to be honest. The bit there that you said about almost and some, I think a part I might be missing this slightly. So apologies if I am. But how I try and look at it is what am I looking at as being appropriate for the age group of the kids that they're in now, and then what do I hope they could do in the next age group up, and what should they have been able to do, or what would I like them to be able to do in the age group below. So if we're thinking about 8s to 11s, we're starting to think about we're starting to think how we work together and support one another. Whereas 4s to 7s, we're thinking more about me and what I can do with the ball. So if I've got a 7-year-old who's already accomplished with the ball and in a game situation, he'll beat all the other players, I might start to think about, right, well, the next stage for you is 8s to 11s, or we start to think about we. So maybe I can start helping you now with how are you going to help and support other people in the team. Likewise, if it's an 8 to 11 and we're thinking about we, the next step after that might be talking about units. So we might, if we've got a really strong 11-year-old or 10-year-old who tactically understands the game really well, I might ask them to start organising units or thinking about how units can connect and link together. So it's about, for me, that almost and some, if I've understood it correctly, might be thinking about what's the next step for that kid in their development. What step would they have been at? And then, well, if someone's struggling, let's help them with what they've missed. And if they're striving, well, let's give them a little bit around what they're going to get to next. Or I might have completely misunderstood almost and some.
No, that's a good take on it.
Yeah, Neil, thanks for sharing that. So yeah, good differentiation there around. You could even use halfway lines there. You're saying around giving them that opportunity to actually receive the ball without being challenged first and foremost. So thinking about the task. Yeah, good, Graham, like that. Some good ideas coming in here. I think one that I've used in the past to spot differentiation is fantasy football. So they've come up with who they want to be. So they've picked like the fantasy football team, and they're all top players. So you might have Messi in there. You might have one of them wanting to be Ramos, one of them wanting to be to Stegen, and it's thinking about how, right, okay, so what is Stegen good at? Okay, so if you do this within the game, you get 5 points for your team. What's Messi good at? Okay, if you do this in the game, you get 5 points. All right, what do you think Stegen could do better? So linking it into them understanding the game as well, like you've talked about there, Graham, around getting them to think about what does Sterling do in this situation? What might he do? What's different? I'll see if I can find the picture. I think it was on a CPD event I delivered at the West Riding. I'll share the PDF with you, James, and you're more than welcome to send it out to the ladies and gents in the coffee club. It's got some ideas in.
Yeah, I'm about that.
Okay. I ain't got my hard drive on now, so it's on there.
What Graham's said there just screams of gamification to me, and what Reedy was talking about before around how different ways to motivate and inspire, and like anything related to FIFA on the PlayStation or Xbox and that kind of thing. It's just going to hit all the buttons for them, isn't it? And it's just how you use it to your advantage. I think what Graham said there, I think that's an excellent idea.
Yeah. Good. I think it's all right, James. We'll kind of flick on.
Yeah, no, good stuff.
I think, guys, just from mine and Ben's perspective, obviously it's been great you throwing stuff in. We've kind of been challenged a little bit, which is good. We didn't want it to be me and Ben just talking. We wanted you to throw stuff in, which kind of threw us off piece a little bit. And we didn't have a script, so to speak, did we, Ben? It was almost like we'll just put some pictures in and just see where it takes us.
I had a plan, but I out the window, didn't I, Jackie?
Yeah. Great analogy. So I think the key thing from us is just if you could put in the chat box, just what have been the takeaways. So what might you try that you previously haven't tried, or what could be something you look to do with the restrictions that are in place, just to support your differentiation. If anyone's got any ideas or anyone wants to pop up and chat, more than welcome. Just take yourself off mute.
Ben, just while people maybe think about putting some stuff in the chat box, for from my point of view, I've got I'm doing a webinar for some level 2 learners on Tuesday, around session planning, and so I'm nicking one of Ben Q's. Look at James Reid, very unsurprised that I'm nicking stuff and being a magpie. Look at your face. Anyway,
that was exactly my thought. Said it, Dave.
The best thing that I'm taking away is what you said earlier, Ben, in terms of right at the very at the start. Have you got 12? And I don't know what age group it was, but have you got 12 under 10s, or have you got 12 individuals? So in other words, how do you plan for differentiating between your group, or do you just, when you're planning, do a football session or a group session? So that's what I'm going to nick and include in my webinar on Tuesday.
Yeah, I am laughing there because you know would be, but it is a great point around it, and it's I suppose it's the lens in which we look at. So what do we see when they walk through the gates onto the pitch? Now I know Ben Hardaker is an example. He will see people, but they all come dressed in the Leeds United Academy gear. They all look exactly the same. They might be slightly different in terms of physical nature, but ultimately we've got to kind of try and look past that strip for me, and look at them as people. And I know coming out of this especially, and that's for me is one of the real key things, and that's why I like this is a good time to talk about this type of thing for the coaches that are on, because them players that walk through your gate have had 3 months. We don't know what their 3-4 months has been like. For some, football is release. For some, they that hour a week is what's being needed. And I know, certainly, I mean, I used to work in, so I know Ben, obviously, Hardaker, I used to work with him, but I used to work in Bradford. And I used to do a lot of work on a real deprived estate in Bradford. And for some, that hour, that 2 hours that they used to come to us every day was their only sort of safety blanket that they had for some of the kids. So it's a really important thing for me is that how we look to start to view these players as people, particularly through and out of this period now where we don't know how people are going to react and what they've been exposed to. I think there's a few people on here as well, certainly, that like the bibs idea. Was it you, Ben Hardaker, that mentioned the bibs idea?
That was that was me. Yeah. I won't.
Ben. No, it was your. Did you steal it, or was it Ben Qualtrough? Ben Qualtrough, wasn't it? Yeah, I think a few like that idea around how they manage it. I suppose the challenge with that is how they manage the teams then. So if we're going to differentiate with groups, so it might not be bibs as an example. I would guess, I'm going to surmise here, but it could be wristbands as an example. It could be a colour wristband or a tag type thing that they allow them to identify themselves within the same sort of structure. Yeah.
Do you know when kids play football on the playground, they never wear bibs?
Yeah.
So it looks nice for us when it's all pretty and we know where the reds and the greens are and who's centre back and who's the centre forward.
Yeah.
But the way I see it, and I know I'm a bit of a pain in that respect, but kids aren't worried about bibs. We worry about bibs because we're coaches and that's what we're paid to do. But kids just want to play football, so it helps us. But kids know who their teammates are.
Yeah, I think, Graham, your point there about trying to experiment, just let's if we just iron out differentiation here, that's all you can do. You can only experiment with it because you're working on a human connection and a relationship. You will get things wrong in differentiation, like in coaching. I do it all the time. I get things wrong, but then I've got a little bit more knowledge to then go forward with around why it didn't work or what I can do differently. So don't think there's like a magic formula here for differentiation. It won't happen just like that. It's something that you've, as a coach, that you've got to keep adapting to. and I'm still doing bits now where I think I've never even thought of doing that, but it's just so simple when you break it down and you see someone else do it, or you just have a little bit of time to reflect on it. So the experimenting is good, and something, go for it, have a go. What's the worst that's going to happen?
Yeah, and I know, I think we asked Pete Sturge when he was on a few weeks ago now what he'd be looking to do, and I know when he'd done the DNA road shows as well, so I'm sure you've seen it before. The suggestion of that one night a month, one morning a month, whatever it may be, tournament style, World Cup, however you dress it up, between foundation phase, youth development, or even specific age groups, was definitely a recommendation, part of the DNA around this play type activity that we've got moving forward. But no, I mean, thanks for that tonight, guys. You can tell they said that they didn't plan, by the way, a lot. Now, I know they did. And I know there was an awful lot of planning and thought that's gone into this evening. So I think they're doing themselves a disservice when they say they haven't planned. And I suppose this is exactly like your coaching session. So people are going to plan and plan and plan for what we're currently going into, for it to potentially go completely the other way. And I suppose that the thing certainly from this evening, we said that's all right. So that's fine when it doesn't go to plan. I know we've had many plans in the past. I know I used to work in the academy with Ben, and we'd have plan after plan. It would be planned down to final pass, and it would never ever go the way it was. But we were made to plan and plan and plan and plan. And I suppose it's brought good habits around the detail in which we go into it. And I know Ben said it was just a few slides put together, but to be fair, it's that detail that gives the engagement and gives people the opportunity to engage with things. So yeah, can I just thank the two Bens, the three Bens, I'll class my gaffer Ben into it as well, for this evening, and sort of jumping in and helping out, and just sharing some stuff. Not, like I said, not everybody, there'll be some stuff people take away, there'll be some stuff that people go, actually I've been doing that for years, that's great. But a real good insight into differentiation. What are things that we might consider to help us, I suppose, differentiate? They've got, so if people want to get hold of them, either of them, I'm sure they'll appreciate. I think this is a seamless plug at some more Twitter followers, but we're on the wrong day because it's far too hot for people to have been engaging with tonight like we've had numbers previously. But I hope those that have been on the call have found it useful, and it'll be recorded and put on our website, and then obviously people can refer to it and go from there. And then there's Ben, this little lad, join us for the last part. So is that the one that's been making all the noise?
Yeah, it won't go to sleep. Been a monkey.
So yeah, that's how you get hold of the two Bens. If you do want to drop them anything, I know, because I know them, they will happily respond and they will happily engage and chat more, as they have done throughout this evening, and speak open and honestly. And like I say, there's a lot of experience in here this evening, certainly between the two of them. So please feel free to connect with them, share some stuff that you're doing. If you're wanting to chat about getting back, Mr. Qualtrough is already ahead of us, and you can see he sits in the lovely sunny garden, just waiting for people to ask him loads of questions around it. So feel free to jump in.
Fly for nose.
But no,
just on that,
like
James, you said about sending out some resources. We one of the youngsters that's working for us, he's put together like some PDFs of the sessions that we delivered when we started back. So if you want me to send them to you, you can send them out when you do the follow up, if you like. Yeah,
no, that would be spot on. Like I said, it's something that Ben shared. So my gaffer Ben has shared just earlier on the chat function something that I got passed on, which was from the foundation. So at Man United, they've put together a bit of probably in the current guidance now, so it's 2 meters apart, 5 or 6 people. They've put together a bit of a PDF sort of Session plans, there's some things to consider in there, and it's decent, to be fair. So if those want to access it, feel free to. It'll be something that'll hopefully help you moving forward. I have been doing quick fire questions. I know how long we've run on, so if you just want to make it quick fire, this will be real quick. In the last few months, what's the best thing you've read, seen, or listened to either? Well, you both answer them, but
just
Ben Hardaker, you going first?
Yeah, just on differentiation. If anyone's not watched The Last Dance, have a little watch at that and how it applies at an elite level as well. You're talking there the differentiation with superstars and what that looks like and how coaches manage that. So how anyone managed to get anything out of Dennis Rodman with whatever was going through his head is beyond me. So have a watch of that for looking at like the psyche and the social elements, and also how you really stretch and challenge players and get them to that point. But really good documentary to have a little watch if no one's watched it.
Ben Qualtrough?
Yeah, superb. That thoroughly enjoyed that. The book I'm reading at the minute is very, very, very good. It's called When the Adult Change, Everything Changes, which I'm sure Ben and Reedy, I'm sure you've come across before. So if you like an audio book or a book, it's very, very good.
Good stuff. Best bit of advice you'd give to a grassroots coach?
It won't always got a plan. Never ever got a plan.
Yeah.
Keep trying, keep learning, keep reflecting, and keep building on what you're good at and what you can get better at.
Thank you.
Yeah, the one I share on every single course is people don't care what you know till they know that you care.
Like it. Best investment you could recommend?
I know nothing about stocks and shares, really. I'm sorry, I'm out on that one.
As a coach, are we talking? Yeah, coach. Time.
I think you're the 14th person of the 14th week to say time, mate. I'm going to change that question. I think I'm going to reword it.
But
you're right. You are
using it effectively, spending the time developing what you need to develop. And I've seen a lot over lockdown where people have watched 30, 35 webinars or listened to 35 podcasts. And I'm saying, well, then what have you taken from the 35 podcasts? It's knowing what you want to get better at and taking that information and what you're going to do with it.
Yeah, I agree. And I know I'm work couple over here because this is our 13th webinar. I suppose that we've kind of used this a little bit as well to get bank of resources together. Not to say you need to go and listen to every single one of them. It's probably some that are more prevalent than others, depending on the time of year. I still go back to it now, although it was very deep. Sally's, which we done in week 3, was so prevalent for what we're currently going through that if people haven't listened to it, certainly go back and have a listen to the one, because it's all about reconnecting and connecting with players, which for me at this current moment in time is probably one of the most important things that we need to start to do. But no, thanks for that, guys. Like I said, they have planned. They did put a lot of time and effort in. So I do, on behalf of the county, really appreciate your time, certainly from the island and from West Riding, Ben. So thanks very much for that.
Thank you.
It's been a real enjoyable one to listen to. Just so the next one coming along, this is in 2 weeks' time. We've got Graham Cake. So Graham is going to be having a look, sharing some of the DNA in the youth development phase, so particularly around the 12s to 16s. Graham's been doing a lot of work extensively for the FA on this area in particular. So where you had Pete Sturgis leading the foundation phase work for the DNA, Graham has been leading the youth development phase area of it with a working group alongside of him. So it'll be certainly one to share and listen. We've not looked a lot, so I think for me, we tend to revert to foundation phase quite a lot, and we tend to use a lot of examples from foundation phase. So for me, this would be a real great one to sort of connect the foundation with development, which is what it does. So it's not sat on its own. There's a real connection between the two. Some of the key messages are the same. So yeah, thanks, Dave. I think that was Dave's first session. Wasn't bad. It wasn't bad, mate. You're right. So yeah, that's 2 weeks time. So that's the 9th of July. Like I said, we're going bi-weekly with these now. I appreciate how hot it's been today. So thank you to those that have logged in. I knew this morning when I got up, and I knew this was planned for this evening. I thought it couldn't have happened on a worse day. Not for these two, but the fact that it was going to be red hot and everybody was going to be outside with barbecues. But I do really appreciate your time that you've gave to log in and chat and share, and being so open and honest around it. And yeah, I did realise you were from West Riding and Hill, but absolutely no problem at all. And thanks for joining in and sharing some of your stuff that you've done and contributed throughout. Yeah, just keep sharing the word. So like I said, every 2 weeks we're going to be on. This will be added onto our website, so they'll all be available to look back and watch on our website. If there is anything, I've said it all the time, so I've took some stuff from what you said earlier on around it, so potentially some sessions might help. So there's the foundation, Man United Foundation, that's gone in there in the chat function. Share that with everybody. The resources that Ben Qualtrough kindly sends over, and the links to the videos. Ben, if you want to share with the links again, and what I'll do is I'll share them. I'll share them with the guys certainly, or the generic coffee club type attendees, and then hopefully we'll see everybody on the Graham Carrick one. So thanks very much for your time this evening, guys. Like I said, thanks again to the 2 Bens, the 3 Bens. Call me the 3 Bs. So the 3 Bens, thanks very much for that, and it's been nice to sit back and listen. So thanks, guys.
Pleasure. Thanks everyone for attending. Thoroughly enjoyed it myself.
Same here. Thank you very much, guys.
Cheers, guys.